Blender for Noobs.
Hello, this is Dan Nobles, and welcome to Blender for Noobs, and welcome to part 3 of our character creation series. In this part of the tutorials, we are going to create our character in MakeHuman and export it. In the previous tutorial, I told you the different levels of the tutorials, and I forgot a couple that I'm going to be putting in here, and that is part 8. I'm going to be adding hair to the character. And in part 9, I'm going to show you what I do for the textures in Photoshop or GIMP or whatever program you use to do that. So there's a little bit more information I'm going to throw in the series of tutorials. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started here. We need to start MakeHuman. So when you start up MakeHuman, it looks somewhat like this. And you get this character that, it's basic half male, half female character that is naked. So let's go ahead and throw some clothes on this poor guy, or woman, or androgynous being, whatever he may be. So I'm going to just throw some casual suit on here. So if you did the last tutorial where you're going to make clothes, you will find that your clothes show up automatically in this list. Now, I see my clothes here as human.001 because I forgot to tell you how to name your clothes. So let me show you that just really quickly before I do anything else. When you make your clothes over here, and sorry, I forgot to mention this, but you just basically rename your clothes mesh here before you make your clothes, and it will change the name of your clothes. You can also get into the MakeHuman directory where the clothes are stored under documents, MakeHuman, and I think you could probably rename it there with no problem. But anyway, in our case, we have this human001. So if you made the clothes, all you need to do is click on that, and bam, there's this clothes. Let's unclick these, and that is the basic clothes that we made. Okay, and I think I see that I did something somewhat wrong. I think I left, I had this thing selected here and I did not need that. So that's something that once we bring him over, we can delete that or whatever. But so anyway, there is his clothes, and you can kind of see that making your own clothes this way, make sure that it fits your human. If you take your human and let's see, if we go to modeling and let's just change his height like that, or, age, you can really see it, make him a little bit little baby. You can see that, the clothes start poking through a little bit, but overall they grow with him and change with him. It's very useful when you're posing characters because I cannot tell you the frustration I had. I was making my own clothes and just putting it on the mesh and parenting and trying to weight paint them. And oh, it was a nightmare because every time, I'd try to move an arm or something, the clothes would poke through and, have them sit down and like their clothes bunch up. And I mean, just a nightmare. This is so much nicer than trying to make your own clothes without the Make Clothes tool. Okay, anyway, so what we're going to do in MakeHuman here is make our own character. So I'm going to make a guy character. So you'll notice in MakeHuman, if you haven't used it, like I said, very, very easy program. You have a lot of settings here at the top, and for each one you have a number of settings as you go through at the bottom shelf here. So we're going to start, you can go ahead and save it if you want, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to go straight into modeling. This is going to be a guy. So instead of going over to the woman, I'm going to go all the way to the right, and all of a sudden he's a guy. You can choose the age. It shows you down at the bottom how old the person is. Let's make this guy kind of young, say 22. Okay. If you want to give him more muscle mass, you can do that. Make him, have more weight to him, make him look like a wrestler or something, or you can make him skinny, whatever you want. You will notice that the default for these things is in the middle, usually. What I would like to see in MakeHuman is a default button, or maybe you could double click this, double click your slider here and it would default, because sometimes you don't want to change this. You want to see what it'll do, but say, no, I want to keep the default. And you just have to kind of guess right in the middle there, which is, that's not too good. Really needs to kind of a way to get back to the default. So height, I'm going to leave it kind of in the middle. Proportions, you can kind of see what that does. All of these you can play around with, see what they do. Just very, very easy to manipulate. So this guy, I'm going to make him a white guy. So Caucasian, I'm going to bump all the way up. But I'm going to say when you do this, don't let that be your final word. Look at your character. Say, okay, what does he look like? Okay, does he really look like what I want him to look like? Maybe he has some Asian in him. Maybe he has some African in him. And maybe he looks more like what you're going for when you do that. So just kind of play around with those settings. They're made so they tried to get the basic, settings of what an African male might look like, or female, or what an Asian or Caucasian looks like. Doesn't necessarily that mean that's what your character looks like. So just go for what he looks like, not all these settings, just basically I'm saying playing around with them. So gender, we haven't done that yet, but this is all for female. It does have a genitals over here that has to do with male, but we're not going to worry about that. Face, you can see that we can play around with the age here. You go down there, kind of makes him look kind of younger or whatever. You can play around with, how fat of a head he has or skinny, that sort of thing. The angle of the head, the overall shape of the head, give him a diamond head if you want to. If I can slide it. So now he has a diamond head. I'm not sure if I've ever seen anybody that looks like that. It's kind of scary. But anyway, so I'm going to turn that off right now. And then you will see over to the right side, you will have all of these settings that you can do. Head size, forehead, eyebrows, neck, right eye, all this stuff. You can change the brow here so it's kind of pronounced or not. The angle, all this stuff. Just run through all this stuff and use these settings to make your human look like what you want him to look like. Move over to torso. My cat just jumped up on the desk and he's rubbing against the microphone, so you probably hear him. Note that when you see things like move, I usually don't mess with the move items, because when you move something, you're really, really kind of destructively changing it in a way. So you can make a really long human like that if you need to. But I usually don't mess with the move ones unless, it has to do with what you're trying to go for. So if it works for what you're doing, then that's fine. You can change his dorsal muscles, give him some, beef up his muscles there. Notice that the clothes, if I do the pectorials too much, it kind of busts through. So I'm not going to do that too much. And you can also, once you get it over to Blender, you can adjust his clothes a little bit so that it's not poking through. If you do need, something like that, that's poking through. Okay, arms and legs, you can change, the length of his fingers and all that good stuff. Random, you can actually create a random human if you want to play around with that. Custom has to do with targets and stuff. I've never really done anything with that, so I'm not even going to go over it. Measure. If you had the exact measurements of your human, you could actually change that, which is very, very cool. Okay, so that's all modeling. I'm going to go over to geometries. And we've already looked at clothes. We've given him the clothes that we made. You can give him whatever clothes you want to here. And if you want to, you can give him some shoes. In my case, the shoes aren't working very good with the clothes that I have here. But if I wanted to, once I get over to Blender, I can cut off the clothes, the part of the clothes that is covering the shoes. So I'm just going to leave it like that for now so we don't get confused with it. Okay, so eyes. I usually use the high poly eyes If you're doing a game character, maybe you want to use low poly. It's up to you. Hair. For hair, I mean, they have some stuff that comes with MakeHuman. A lot of different hairstyles. For a guy, this short hair usually works pretty good. These controls kind of mess me up sometimes because they're not quite the same as Blender. But so you got the, some short hair that you can use. Kind of weird. That one looks kind of all right. But in my case, on tutorial part 8, I'm going to show you how to use Blender hair. So you can use the hair here if you want, but in my case, I'm not going to use it because I'm going to make my own, which is much nicer in Blender. So I'm going to choose none. Okay, going to teeth. This is really up to you. For my characters, I gave them teeth because at some point they may need to grit their teeth or something like that. I can tell you that sometimes when I open their mouth like they're talking, the teeth tend to look kind of funny to me. I mean, they kind of get in the way. So if it's a character that is not like a main character and he's only like appearing for a certain scene or something, I don't give him any teeth. In this case, I'm not going to give this guy any teeth. Topologies. Okay, generally I leave it as none. I use the standard topology that it has, but you can play around with using some of these different topologies, like, this muscular topology that they have here. If you're making like some guy that's supposed to be really muscular, you can try those out. But in my case, I'm going to use none. Eyebrows. And notice they have these filters over here too. You can filter the different, topologies that you have. Eyebrows, they have all these different options here. So you can add eyebrows. You notice when you add eyebrows, it really starts to give your character kind of a personality. I don't really particularly like these eyebrows. I mean, I might use it for a generic character. Like I might use those or something for a generic character. But generally, I put my own eyebrows, and in part 9 in my tutorial on texturing, I'm going to show you how to create your own there. Very, very easy if you know how to use Photoshop or GIMP. So I'm going to leave that as none. I'm going to go to eyelashes. For guy characters, I normally don't give them any eyelashes. I mean, you can give them the small ones if you want to, but they tend to look just kind of strange sometimes. The more pronounced the eyelashes, the more they look kind of female or something. So I'm going to leave him with none at this point. Tongue. You can give him a tongue if you want to. I never do my characters because I don't need a tongue on my characters. They're not running around sticking out their tongues, so and you never really see it, so I just leave it out. Okay, so those are the geometries. Now, go over to the fun part, materials. And on the left, you'll see skin and eyes. These are very important. So skin, this is where if you had like a, African character, then you would have your African settings or Asian settings. In my case, this guy is going to be Caucasian. I'm going to choose the middle-aged Caucasian. And you'll notice that you also have, the old people too. That's actually female. So you can see the old skin shows wrinkles. Does a pretty good job. So I'm going to choose my middle-aged, where was he? Caucasian male. Okay, so there he is. Once you add the skin in here, this basically is a texture, and it looks, makes the character start to come alive, to life a little bit. Now, what you should have done, of course, because I'm really, really speeding through this, I don't want to spend a lot of time making specific settings on the character. I just want to give you the basics so you'll know what to do. But of course, you'll want to play around with the eye, placements and the position of the eyebrow, the mouth, nose, all that stuff to make your specific character unique. But I'm not going to get that in depth on this guy. So you also notice with the texture, they have like a kind of a basic short hair texture, which I've used quite a bit. I mean, it's kind of nice for an older character. I can make it kind of gray, by changing the texture in Photoshop. And it's just like a nice generic hair there if you don't need to add a character with a lot of hair. Okay, so don't forget, once you do this, to select eyes. Because eyes, for me, I would think eyes would be somewhat under here, but this is really the geometry of the eyes. If you go to the materials of the eyes, then you get all this. So, just depends on what you want your character to have. I'm going to give him, let's do blue-green. I've never done blue-green. So it looks kind of freaky and MakeHuman. I mean, they look really kind of neon or something, but you also notice that they look kind of glossy and kind of cool here, but you will find out that when you bring them over to Blender, they don't look quite so cool. But I'm going to show you in part 6 of this series how to make your eyes look really good. Okay, so he's got eyes now. So that's these settings here under materials. Now we choose pose animate. So we start out with skeleton. I always go over here and I just use the default no toes. I don't need any skeleton, any skeleton pieces for the toes. I'm not going to be moving the toes around. Or you can just leave it default. Either one's fine. But this is basically the rig that you're going to be using so you can move your character around if you need to. Okay, so once you got that, go over to pose, and there's just a lot of poses here. You can make him fly, or you can make him run. And what this is kind of good for, and notice that piece that I need to get rid of there is screwing things up, but these are kind of good for kind of seeing how the clothes are reacting to the different poses. And you can see he's got some problems here with these tights, but nothing that, is going to be so terrible when you start to pose your character in Blender. So he has also, you can do the standard T-pose, which used to be the MakeHuman standard, the standard for a lot of poses, of course. But I just usually leave it as none, which is this basic pose now in MakeHuman. Okay, so again, you have tag filters here, expressions. You can actually change your expressions here. They look pretty weird, some of them, but he's in disgust right now, and now he's crying. Now he's bored, or it looks like he's blowing something. I don't know what he's doing, but anyway. So you can use some of these expressions if you want, but I'm going to show you how the MHX format that we're going to be using, you can do your own expressions quite easily. So I'm going to choose none, just so we have our standard character. So we're done with all that. Go over to rendering. You can render him if you want to, but we're going to be doing all that in Blender, not in MakeHuman, so not worry about that. Viewer, scene, yeah. I haven't really done anything with this stuff, but you can kind of play around with the different lightings here. Interesting. If you want to. Settings, all it has to do with the settings within MakeHuman, so you can kind of look at this stuff if you want to. I've never really had the need to change any of these settings in MakeHuman, and I've done a lot of characters, but if you need to change something, check them out. Utilities, you can see the logs and things here in MakeHuman, and of course the help files, all that. So we've ran across all of these things quite quickly. Like I said, very easy program to use. Now all that is left is to save it. So by default, you can see it is going into my documents folder, and it is going into the MakeHuman V1 models folder for me. Well, that's the load. I don't want the load. I want to save. So when you save, it's going to save basically in that directory that it shows here on your screen. So save, and I'm going to just call this guy, let's call him Mr. Tutorial Test Guy, and save him. Now, when you save him, you can see down here where it's actually saving it to it. So you can click it several times because it kind of disappears really quick. You can see where it's saving to. When you save him, what you're doing is you're saving him in the MakeHuman format. So when you open MakeHuman again, if you want to change him around, you can load him up. So this has nothing to do with Blender, saving it for Blender. What has to do with saving it for Blender is exporting. So if you go to export, as long as you follow the instructions that I gave you in part 1, you should see this MHX2 MakeHuman Exchange format. And that's what we're going to be using, this awesome plugin. So select that. When you select that, you'll see over here, feet on the ground. I usually change this to meter because according to VScorpion C, instead of the character coming in as just a gigantically huge character in the Blender, it's not quite so big if you choose meter. So I'm in the habit of doing that. So now I'm going to keep the same name that I used for saving him in MakeHuman, tutorial test guy, and I'm going to export. And when it exports, again, you will see the directory that you need to take note of down at the bottom. So it's done exporting. We have created our MakeHuman character. We've set his attributes and everything that we want. We've clothed him, which is a good thing. And now we're going to go over to Blender, and we are going to import our character into Blender. And you're going to see how awesome this MHX2 plugin really is and how great the rig is. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in part 4 of this tutorial series.